Hosney Mead in Oxford lived a carpenter called Oswald, a crusty old misery just like him over there, but he had a pretty young thing called Alison. Now everyone was in love with Alison. She was as pert and pretty as a squirrel up in a tree, though to tell the truth, she should not have flirted so much with the men. Most of the time she was only joking, like with poor Absalom, the clerk. But Absalom got quite the wrong idea. He was all set to elope with her whenever she said the word. Nicholas was a different pot of jam. Nicholas was a lodger in the carpenter's house, and Alison could not take her eyes off him. He was allowed to steal a kiss in the dark of the larder, and while he helped her hang the washing. The carpenter, knowing he wasn't the prettiest duck on the pond, was fearlessly jealous about his pretty young wife. He never let her go out alone, and trusted her in the company of no man except Nicholas. "Nicholas is an educated man," he would tell his neighbours proudly, "a clever man, a religious man." It was true that Nicholas was clever. It was he who thought of the plot, after all, a plot to make an utter fool of the carpenter. He whispered the plot to Alison, who giggled behind her hand. Then he went to his room with food enough for a fortnight, and locked himself in. "Where's Nicholas?" said the carpenter 3 days later. "He hasn't eaten with us since Monday." Then Alison wrung her hands. "I'm worried about him, husband. He locked himself in the room on Monday with nothing to eat. He won't answer to knocking. He must be ill. But what can I do?" "Well, why didn't you say so, woman?" The carpenter leapt up the steps and hammered on the lodger's door. "Nicholas! Nicholas, old son, open up, won't you?" And when he got no answer, he threw himself against the door until it fell off its hinges. There sat Nicholas, bolt upright on the edge of his bed. His eyes were lifted towards the ceiling, and a strange humming came from his nose. "Lord have mercy! I told you he was religious!" cried Oswald. "He's in some kind of trance. He's seeing visions." And shaking Nicholas by the hair, he shouted in his ear, "Wake up, boy! Snap out of it!" 1 blink, 2 blinks, and Nicholas closed his mouth with a sigh. "Oh, Brother Oswald, I've been visited by the angels, and they showed me such visions." "What? Tell us, what?" Then Nicholas clearly clapped the carpenter in a place and said tearfully, "You've been like a father to me, so I'm going to tell you a terrible secret. The angels themselves revealed it to me. The end of the world is coming." "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph!" said the carpenter, crossing himself. "What? Fire and brimstone?" "No, no," said Nicholas in the most saintly of voices. "You remember Noah?" "Well, of course I remember Noah," Oswald burst out excitedly. "Noah who?" Nicholas sighed with all the patience of a holy martyr. "You remember how in the Bible we are told that God sent for rain for 40 days and 40 nights, and the whole world was drowned except for Noah, who built an ark, that's to say a boat, and he floated to safety and started up the human race all over again after the flood dried up?" "Is it rain then? Are we all to be drowned, me and you and Alison and the cat?" All, said Nicholas in sepulchral tones, "unless—" He told the carpenter to fetch 3 big watertight barrels and to hang them up on the roof beams of the house by stout hem ropes, a barrel for each of them. "When the rain comes, the flood will rise and rise until it sets the barrels afloat. Then, at a given signal, we shall cut the ropes and float away on the tide. Take a bit of bread and cheese up there with you. We may be floating about for some time before God ends the flood." Calling down blessings from heaven on Nicholas, the carpenter hung the 3 barrels on the roof, climbed into one, and sat waiting for the flood. When, after an hour or so, it got boring waiting for the flood, he dozed off and dreamt he was ruling the empty world with Alison on one side of his throne and Nicholas on the other. Down below, Nicholas and Alison fell into each other's arms in a fit of helpless, silent laughter. They sat on settle and held hands and kissed and carried on into the darkest hours of the night, when the whole tower was asleep. A sudden soft tapping at the shutters made them both sit up with a start. It was followed by a quiet, high-pitched coo. "Allison, it's me! It's Absalom! Allison, sugar pie, honey bee, baby bubbles, chickadee, give me a kiss, won't you? Everyone's asleep but you and me. Even the moon's hiding herself tonight. Now we can steal a kiss, can't we?" Allison clapped her hand over her mouth and whispered, "What shall I do, Nicholas? You wake Oswald." Sure enough, a bleary voice from overhead said, "Has the flood come? Is it time yet?" "No, dear, go back to sleep," called Allison, and soon snores were bending from the rafters like a bow saw. But still Absalom was at the window. "What shall I do?" hissed Allison. "I suppose he must have his kiss," said Nicholas, rising from the settle. The window was high up, higher than a man's head. In a voice as high as a fluted cod, Nicholas whispered through the shutter, "Dearest boy, how I've longed for this moment. But close your eyes. It's not fitting that a woman should be seen in her night clothes, even on the darkest of nights, and even by one she loves so dearly." And he leaned out the window to plant a kiss on Absalom's waiting lips. Allison burst into such a fit of giggles that she had to stuff her apron into her mouth, and still the laughter snorted and sniffled in her nose. Down the street Absalom heard the giggle, felt Nicholas's beard tickle his chin, and guessed at the truth. He danced off down the road with such a heat of temper that his vest was all but scorched. But not one sound escaped his lips, only silent, wicked curses. Nicholas gave that snigger of his, and then returned to the settle to complete the unfinished business. Tap, tap, tap. Absalom was back again. "Allison, dear, dearest, that one kiss has fired such love in me that I shan't sleep a wink without you kiss me again."
"Oh, make him be quiet, Nicholas,"
hissed Allison, and Nicholas smirked. Going to the window, he called through the shutters,
"Now this must be the last, dear heart. Now close your eyes, won't you? You may kiss me now."
And on edging to the window-sill, he proffered Absalom the seat of his pants. Absalom was waiting for him. He had been to the forge and heated a branding iron in the blacksmith's fire. Now he stood brandishing it like the devil with his pitchfork. And as Nicholas's trousers came through the window, Absalom lunged. They heard the scream in Banbury. Up in the barrel, the carpenter woke to hear a noise very like the end of the world, and Nicholas's voice yelling, "Water! Water!" as he galloped round the room and fell over the settle. "It's come! The rains have come!" thought Oswald, and cut through the ropes, tying his barrel to the roof, thinking to float away. He dropped like a stone right on the top of the kettle, his wife and the lodger. The cat, who had been sleeping in Oswald's lap, gave a yowl and leapt out of the window. It found the street full of neighbours tumbling out of their beds and out of their doors to find the cause of the commotion. The neighbours found Oswald, Nicholas, and Allison, the settle, a barrel, and a plentiful supply of bread and cheese, all squandered in a heap. The carpenter was shrieking, "It's the end of the world! Swim for your lives!" A trickle of smoke was rising from the seat of the lodger's trousers. Who said what, and whether they were believed, I shan't ever know, for at this point the reeve came back with a tongue like a fly-swat, and demanded that the miller be disqualified from the competition. "He only told that story to spite me. I'm a carpenter, aren't I? I'm called Oswald, aren't I?" I thought he was going to chew the ears off his horse, he looked so aggrieved. Then the prioress Eglantine chimed in. "Oh, you've made me blush, Master Miller. Regardez, monsieur, je suis blushing," she exclaimed, fanning her snow-white cheeks. "By St. Louis, what a coarse story!" She adjusted her wimples so that she sat well back on her forehead. "What we really want," she said coyly, "is a nice story about nice people. No one will mind me saying so, but if we have to start stories about lower-class people, we're bound up with nasty stories like that. We want a finer story altogether. Glowing phrases, uplifting thoughts. I'm sure there's someone here who can tell us a story in the grand style." The miller scowled at her. "Lower class of people indeed. I suppose you want stuff about princesses and heroic princes galloping on chargers spouting bits of Latin?" Prioress and Engleton sniffed.
Fancy you know anything about romantic literature, and men of your low breeding.
The lapdog sprawled across the pommel of the prioress's saddle, began to wriggle and whine. Perhaps it could sense the feelings of Matt and the other working men towards its mistress.
There, there, little fellow, lisped the nun. Has the nasty coarse man upset you?
Brother John, the accompanying of the prioress, rode his horse into the centre of the group and tried to take the sting out of the quarrel. "I wonder why poets do always write about princes and princesses," he said, as if he was thinking out loud. "I vouch I could tell a story in the grand style of the most ordinary folk." Engleton looked annoyed.
Monsieur John, do we have to have another story about squalid working people?
The miller and his cronies growled menacingly. Brother John was unperturbed. "I'll go one better," he offered. "I'll tell you a story about a couple of common chickens, and you just see if it doesn't have all the romance of Venus and Adonis and the excitement of Homer's Odyssey." Eglantine primped herself in the saddle, and getting out a small mirror, examined her face intently. A strand of hair had escaped her wimple. She curled it round one finger, and it looked most fetching coiled beneath her cheekbone.
"Oh, all right, John dear, but do make it poetical. You know how sensitive I am."
So John began. "There was once a small house miles from town. Its one room was dark with soot."
"Excuse me," said the Oxford scholar, "but that doesn't sound like grand poetical English to me. All the words are so short."
"John!" snarled Princess Eglantine, "this had better be poetical." "Please don't distress yourself, lady, sir," said Brother John, patting down their anxieties with large white hands. "I'm saving the poetry for the hero and the heroine."